Hello, my name is Sarah Daly and I'm an Associate Director at Turner & Townsend, and today's session is about embedding social value in retrofit projects. So first, let's just have a little look at the topics we'll be covering today. I won't read through them because I'm sure you'll be able to read them yourselves, but it will just give you an outline of the key messages that we'll be looking at. So just to position it, we're, I suppose, giving you an introduction to social value and how it can operate within projects, but it's a massive subject, and I'm sure, as you can appreciate, it's a degree level course in its own right. So, we're not going to be covering every single aspect, but hopefully enough to get you through your own retrofit projects. So what is social value then? Well, you can see from the little diagram there, the sweet spot, which is where shared social value actually occurs, is, and particularly in relation to publicly funded projects, is where you've got, say, the local authority, the community and the built environment organisations all coming together to identify ways that they can find additional value that wouldn't otherwise be generated by the project. So quantifying the non-financial values in monetary terms, so this allows us to demonstrate and maximise the social impact created by a project. So the catch-all term that's often used here is what difference can an organisation or its projects make to the communities that they're operating in. And a really interesting way of looking at that, I suppose, is the old bang for the buck theory. So if £1 is spent on the delivery of services, can that same pound be used to create wider benefit to the community? That's really the fundamental point of social value. So you might wonder why it's important to embed social value in your projects. Well, there's so many different paybacks, and this list could be extended on, but firstly, it's ensuring that there's a social and environmental return on investment. So again, we know through circular principles, etc., that you can engage in a project which becomes environmentally positive, or it could be environmentally negative if you don't actually adopt the right principles. And it's exactly the same with social value. So what you do can support your local economy, it can create new employment opportunities, local residents or particular groups, and allows you to promote equality, diversity and inclusion. And the point at the bottom there, improve the health and well-being of local residents. Well, that's really important too, because a lot of the things that are either consequential impacts or consequential detriments really of projects are the sorts of things that aren't thought through properly, or are if you like, structured in the right way. So you actually have much more control than you think you have on both positive and negative impacts on projects. And it all comes down really to this this one act, really, the Public Services Social Value Act 2012, which is basically, I mean, it's been there obviously since 2012, and amazing how many organisations don't really know about it. But when it first came out, it was actually to show that you'd considered, in inverted commas, social value, whereas from January 2021, it actually became mandatory to include, I suppose, appropriate, measurable and deliverable outcomes that could be attached to social value. And that's now been put in at 10%, but actually, a lot of local authorities and certainly some of the larger combined authorities and government departments are actually setting it at 20%, because they can see the absolutely phenomenal payback that's already being achieved by those organisations that are including it. And interestingly, the London School of Economics have actually done a study which actually shows that something like £49 billion of extra value can be driven through public funding by adopting these social value principles. So it really is, it's not a nice to have, it's absolutely fundamental to getting value for money out of public funding. So in terms of achieving community benefits through retrofits then, so there's different stages that you can look at. So at the delivery stage, you can recruit local residents for the project. So that obviously you can develop resident skills, which then can take them through into other career pathways or other employment opportunities. So it might be short-term input in relation to your project, but it might have a transformational benefit to that individual for their future prospects. And even offering work experience or placements and of course apprenticeships can help raise employment rates of young people. And in fact, not only young people, there's all sorts of different groups who can benefit from these sorts of approaches. And there are plenty of charities and not-for-profit organisations who can help facilitate your community initiatives and training programmes. And again, that's really important because a lot of individuals say, look, I can barely cope with the things I have on my own desk without thinking of all these other programmes that you have to build in. But that's really what we want you to think about. How can you engage with others to achieve the greatest possible benefits without necessarily burdening your own team? Through scoping, it's really important as well. So there's all sorts of things like creating rooftop gardens and tree planting and benches. Those sorts of things can improve the wellbeing of residents. And you can create community spaces. So again, those sorts of things can tie in with other community groups who are already active. And it might be that there's already funding in existence, so there might just be a small top-up that's added into your plans that will actually help perhaps embed some of the principles that you're looking at. And through planning, so there's a briefing note which is published by the Social Value Portal, which claims that integrating the Social Value Act into the planning process has the potential to unlock an additional 15 billion for our communities every year. So again, big numbers here. We're talking about a lot of real deliverables. Now, Only Close is a really interesting case study. So this was a large-scale passive house retrofit in Manchester. They had noted that the community didn't previously interact, so people were very sort of cellular in their attitude to their own home. And these houses were, or apartments were very, obviously needed deep retrofit, so were in quite a poor condition. But they've now managed to elevate not only the living standards of the homes themselves, but also, as you can see, a really superb sort of public space. So the community now, they host barbecues, they mix together, they sit and chat in the garden area. They take responsibility for those areas. That's something that can be built up, so it can be built into the programme initially that there's external support for gardening, and then over time actually hand over to the community. But those properties now have low voids, so here we get to the payback social housing provider, because if you've got people who really do treasure and look after their homes and the spaces around them, and that obviously substantially reduces ongoing management costs and all of those issues associated with either void properties or the exponential costs that can be associated with refurbishing poorly maintained homes that people just haven't loved and respected. So now they've ended up in a situation where people really do want to stay there, and other people want to live there. So you create desirability. So it's got all the wins there, hasn't it? And it's very easy to see how you move beyond something superficial to do just with energy efficiency and retrofit from that perspective to a much more holistic approach about really substantially changing people's lives and communities. Now, engaging with the supply chain is really important because, as you can imagine, there's a very strong correlation between the whole procurement sort of setup, really, I suppose, and how you're approaching retrofit. So you need to start your supply chain engagement early and understand how they're going to deliver social value. So some of them might already be very sophisticated in what they're doing, and others might not even have thought about it before. So it's worth thinking about organising supply chain events, particularly if you've got a disparate range of suppliers that you'll be dealing with. And also perhaps engaging with some other organisations you haven't previously thought about working with. So other SMEs and micro businesses and family-run businesses that are in the communities you're going to be operating in. It's really important to try and get them involved. Again, that's very much part of social value is trying to spread the opportunities as widely as you can in the communities. Now, adding social value into the tender evaluation criteria and scoring is really important, and we've got another masterclass actually about procurement, which will help you to understand how you can structure that. But if you actually embed it into the tender evaluation process, then obviously they're going to have to take it seriously, and you know, those companies engaging with you are going to be much more likely to not just, you know, cut and paste something, but actually think about it. If you've set the criteria even before the tender comes out of the sorts of things you want to see, so you know, it is quite an iterative process, and you can work with your supply chain to help them to embed and measure and manage social value in their own practices and their own operations, but also so you can tie those, you know, between yourselves and your suppliers, or it might be they're doing things that don't sit directly in your programme, but you still feel they've got high value in the community. So either way, what you're doing is showing that it is really important for these considerations to be part of the way they go about engaging with you. But do bear in mind that initiatives sometimes come at a cost. It's not always a direct material cost, although obviously that can be the case, but there can also be some time and resource requirements, again depending on the scale and the size of the projects that are involved. So equality, diversity and inclusion. Now we've got another masterclass which actually covers EDI, so you know, you can find a lot more detail in there, but there are considerations at a project level around resident engagement, which again feed into the whole social value side of how you operate. We need to start thinking at a very early stage about inclusive design for all and incorporating community into all the stages of the project life cycle. So, you know, some of these things, again, you might know about, and your organisations might already be very active in this space, and for others of you, it might be quite a new consideration. So it's really important that you start to engage with the sorts of people and organisations internally and externally who are going to help you achieve these objectives. So for the organisation itself, ensuring distribution, you know, or representative distribution of protected characteristics in the local workforce, that's really important. And that's obviously for you as an organisation, but also through your supply chains. But you can embed EDI in the whole employee life cycle, as I'm sure you're aware if you've studied this, or if not, you know, again, look to our masterclass in this area. But it's really important to collect baseline data and monitor it over time. You know, what we find with a lot of this is that either people are very surprised how underrepresented groups are, or they're quite delighted that actually they do have above average representation and they need to maintain that. So either way, there's always something to look at and learn. So how's social value measured? Well, this is, there's a whole range of different ways. This is an extract from Tom's, which works on the basis of a theme, an outcome and a measure. So here's just some examples. This isn't by any means telling you what you should do, but just giving you an example of how you might approach a Tom's-like methodology. So you can see on the left we've got a couple of themes. So building shared prosperity, how do you implement that? And doing things with residents, not to them. So they're sort of quite usual themes that people have to make sure that they've got that connection. So in terms of outcomes, you can see there are a whole range of things there which are making you just interrogate, I suppose, what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and if there's you know, different perhaps procedures that you could have in place and different approaches to the market that would allow you to you know, get more balanced outcomes. And in terms of measures, again, all sorts of ways that you can look at this. You can quantify how things have changed, you know, from your baseline through to completion of your project. You can look at the amount spent with different categories of people, and you can look at things like volunteering hours, all sorts of different measures, and there will be many more aside from those, but that just gives you an idea. And just to put it in context, obviously Tom's tends to be the one that a lot of local authorities and public organisations go to. Tom's is actually about any social value measurement. Obviously, it's not just to do with retrofit or to do with housing. You know, it's a generic standard, but it does follow, you know, what most people find to be quite a straightforward methodology. There's also HACT, who have the roadmap for social value and social housing. Again, very useful if you want something again to benchmark against and to give you a tool and perhaps some inspiration, I suppose, for some different ways of approaching social value. And I've included the SDGs there because whilst they might seem like they've been around for a little while, they are actually still really relevant to this, to just understanding. Not everyone will be relevant to every situation that you're working with, but actually they do provide a really good framework for making sure that you're having a very balanced approach to any projects that you're actually executing. So if we look at that sort of approach then and come back to the Only Close example, this was interesting because on completion, the One Manchester team actually engaged the University of Salford to undertake some quantitative evaluation. And as you can see from the figures there, they were particularly interested in seeing what they thought the beneficial impact might be of decent homes versus passive house upgrades. And again, it's really interesting to see that once you start to actually quantify social value, and some elements are harder to measure than others, but actually there's also you have to have a baseline there in order to identify what the other benefits might be. And as you can see, there is actually an enormous bang for the buck. I mean, up to decent homes is significant, but then take it from decent homes to passive house, and you really start to get into a stage where every conceivable benefit of a housing retrofit project, is seen in stark reality. And the reason why these sorts of things are really important is because very often organisations, when they're trying to make the business case, they struggle to get the data and they struggle to get the evidence. You've got to create your own evidence as you go along. Other people's evidence is often really hard to use. So, learn from these sort of approaches, maybe partner with another institution who will help to do the baselining and the data gathering for you and provide that third party evidence. But also, of course, if you use tools like Tom's, it will help you to measure those benefits too. So there are lots of ways that you can start putting this case together and stop yourselves as an organisation getting stuck in those sort of ruts where people just want to do the early, the easy, low line, low hanging fruit is kind of where everybody wants to go on these programmes. Everyone, sorry, but sometimes senior management can just want to tick off large numbers of small interventions, whereas actually sometimes you do need to have those deeper interventions to get the real return on investment. So what can you do? Well, it's quite nascent really, isn't it, this idea of social value being hardwired into programmes. But if you identify pro-social companies and you can start to develop partnerships, you'll very soon find that it's going to be much, much easier for you to get up to speed and get up and running and really start delivering sort of very substantial benefits into your programmes. So that can't start soon enough, to be honest. If you haven't already taken this approach, then please do. Encouraging things like returnships or return to work programmes for women and carers. We've got to be a bit careful there. There's no reason why all returners will be female. There are plenty of men who like to take a career break, and there are plenty of people of all descriptions who are carers. So we've got to start getting much broader again, I suppose, in our own EDI consciousness of how we consider things. But there is definitely a move happening at the moment to make sure that there are more women in construction and people with disability as well, so that there's a much broader workforce. Promoting apprenticeships, especially targeting minority or disadvantaged backgrounds, again, really important. And very often there will be other groups who will be on the case about this or taking it on a new market. But for example, FE colleges are very good at reaching into secondary school level and having early career conversations with particular groups. So you might not have to do this yourself, but you might have to engage with the FE College to say, look, we're really interested in finding some of these apprentices when you've identified them, or we can bring forward our supply chains to provide opportunities for them as well. So it might just be a little bit of joined up thinking with different groups. There's often suppliers as well who are working very closely with ex-offender programs, and even some that are actually operating in prisons with prisoners so that they're training them before they are discharged. And the idea there again is to sort of develop skills and rehabilitation programs at an early stage. But if you identify suppliers who will employ people with disabilities, or people from minority groups, again that starts to develop a different sort of rapport and relationship. And all the reports that we have had back so far have shown that the benefits are enormous all round. So this isn't about giving you something that's going to create a lot of extra hassle and paperwork for you. It's about, again, finding those sweet spots in different relationships and almost letting the virtue of everybody going in the same direction to create the outcomes. But it goes back to this point again, if you don't embed the expectations in your procurement teams as well, and bring the market with you by making sure that all of your suppliers, first, second tier and beyond, understand about this, then it's a lot harder. You can't really do it on your own. And it's really important as well to try and quantify in terms of your targets, and then having something to measure against. Try and set demonstrable social value targets, as the previous case study showed, so that you've got a value in terms of money as well. So I suppose we get to this stage where we're talking about breaking down barriers, celebrating difference, and creating value. So you'll have seen some really inspirational people who are coming on our screens with how they've broken through their own personal challenges to then inspire us all. Well, why aren't we doing more of this within the normal working world? What's to stop us really opening the doors to all of these people who've got what would otherwise have been considered real challenges? And actually you find they're the people who are the most motivated and inspired and hardworking and diligent, and this is the reason we're doing it. This is the reason all of us will get really excited about those differences we make to people's lives by giving them the opportunities. So there's a list of references here which hopefully will help you. If you can either pause the presentation and obviously pick them up from here, or if there's any further information that you want from our team, then please do get in touch. You can either contact me directly at Turner & Townsend, or go to our social housing retrofit team at the info@ email address there, and they'll be able to answer any of your questions. So thank you very much.